Greetings! For today's quick news video, there's a couple of things I want to show you guys and that I want to talk about. The very first thing I want to show is this new product from Liquitex. They have released a masking fluid. So they say it's colorless, it dries a bit yellow, but that's fine. It is latex based, but the thing that puzzled me a bit is that they sell it with their acrylic medium range, and they say to use it with fluid application of acrylic colors and washes. So I'm left wondering if it can be used for watercolor too. They don't really specify, so that's a bit puzzling. Seems to be a really promising product regardless, but I'd be curious to see someone try it with watercolor and to see how that turns out. Next, I want to talk about Jackson's, because you know I really like Jackson's. They had been sort of stuck in terms of new supplies and new products lately, but it unblocked all of a sudden, and there's a bunch of new things available. So I will quickly scroll through them. There is nothing particularly watercolor related, but there is a lot of stuff that is connected to watercolor. So they have a bunch of new brushes. They now have the Etcher Cotton Sketchbook, which might be really interesting. They sell more traveler's notebook supply. I know this is more of a planning and journaling kind of thing, but sometimes there's a bit of overlap. People like to do art in them, and that can be really interesting to have access to those supplies at Jackson's. Then we see that they have Etcher watercolor sets as well, and a bunch of new Spectrum Noir markers. I'm not super familiar with this brand, but I had heard of it. Let me know in the comments if you guys are familiar with Spectrum Noir markers and what do you think of them. There's a new brand of acrylic ink pens a la Posca, you know, the very trendy acrylic markers, the Posca pens. Well, now we have this Yono range from Marabout. They seem to have a lot of new screen printing supplies. That's something I can really give my opinion about because I'm not familiar with this, but there's a lot of it, enough that you take notice when you scroll through the news page. And among the last few things, they now have a new range of various products. The company seems to be Zealer, and they have a bit of everything. I saw like acrylic paints, I saw lino print stuff, I saw watercolor sets that looked a bit too much like Sakurakoi for me. It's a bit suspicious, but it's there. I have no idea what all that stuff is worth in terms of performance, but it's new. And finally, and possibly the thing that I was the most excited about, is that Jackson's now has a bunch of Rohar and Klinger inks. They seem to have a couple of Indian inks, and then they have calligraphy inks, and there's also the sketch inks. The sketch inks, maybe you've heard about, they're super interesting because they can be put in fountain pens and they are waterproof. So if you like to draw with fountain pens or if you like to ink with fountain pens, you can look at this range and find a color of ink that might be interesting to use for inking. They have all sorts of colors like yellow, magenta, green, blue, black, gray. The calligraphy inks are really beautiful. The colors are super nice and vibrant, and I've seen these used as a bit like watercolor, like you dilute them with water and you can make layers that won't be reactivated. So it's super interesting for layering. I'm not at all familiar with the Indian inks, but they're there. Sorry. And maybe finally, the last thing is, quickly, I wanted to mention that Jackson's has a new blog post that is about pigments and the pigment codes and the pigment numbers and all that. It seems to be the first in a series of blog posts, so it's sort of an overview of this pigment stuff. It's a very interesting read. It's a really good reference point, like a page you can send people who are a bit confused about pigments, and it goes over all the main features of the pigment names and colors and all that. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you thought that something in there was interesting. We will see each other in the next video. In the meantime, have a great time, guys. Take care. Bye bye.